Welcome, Rotarians and guests, to the Rotary Club of York, where our mission is to improve life in the city of York by connecting our club's diverse community leaders through fellowship, action, and service. I'm your president, Wilda Reed, and as you know, we start off our meetings by reciting the four-way test. Please join me. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Today, our opening song, God Bless America, and the pledge will be led by past President Glenn Miller, followed by the invocation by Steve Feldman and visitor introductions by Tom McCracken.
Thank you, President Wilda. Good afternoon, everyone. Please join me. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. I hope the basses and the altos appreciated the key. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in a word of prayer. Dear Lord of all, we come before you today recognizing that we ought to be more grateful for electric power than we are. I kind of take it for granted, and I suspect I'm not alone. It's easy to forget that many of my parents' friends and rural neighbors, and indeed my own mother-in-law, grew up without it. So we are grateful for our speaker today and for his update on the present state of things in our country's electric power concerns. Bless this Rotary Club, its leaders, and all its members to aspire to the high calling our ideals set for us. That starts by expressing our thanks for the country club staff for the food that they have prepared and served. It continues as we all walk out the door, extending kindness, concern, and care for the next person we meet, and the person after that, and the person after that. Because each person we meet is part of that all concerned we speak of every week. Amen.
I am pleased to have the honor of introducing guests for today's meeting. When I call your name, please stand and remain standing until President Wilda has welcomed you. Nathan Moons, guest of Youth Exchange. Sanaya Phillip, guest of Youth Exchange. Sterling Dunlap, guest of past President John Kleinentz. Brian Climes, guest of BJ Fagley. Ellen Carter-Nicholas, guest of BJ Fagley. Barry Carball, guest of Rich Randall. Kaio Sabraya, guest of Thomas Calcher-Jerome. Stephanie Sabraya, guest of Thomas Calcher-Jerome. Craig Charters, guest of Jane Schussler. Lon Lebo, guest of Sarah White. And Michael Hershey, guest of Matt Summer.
Guests, we're so glad to have you here with us today. Whether this is your first visit or you're back again, it's always a pleasure to have new faces in the room. If what you see here today resonates with you, we'd love to have you consider becoming part of our Rotary family. Rotarians, please help me welcome our visitors. You may be seated. And now for some announcements. Congratulations to our tech guru, Ben, on the birth of his daughter, Juliet, 2 weeks ago. Thanks for being here today, Ben. The Membership Recruitment Committee will meet today at 1:30 following this meeting downstairs in the Mixed Grill. The York Rotary Foundation Board of Directors meets tomorrow at 4 o'clock on Zoom. The Membership Engagement Committee meets on January 23rd at 8 a.m. on Teams. The Student Education Committee will meet on January 27th at 8 a.m. on Zoom. And the Service Project Development Committee will also meet on January 27th at noon at Prince Street Cafe. And just a reminder that our meeting next week on January 28th will be held at Crispus Attucks York at their Duke Street Community Center. We will enjoy lunch and then take a short 3-minute walk to the nearby Crispus Attucks York History and Culture Center, where we will enjoy a special preview tour of the soon to be open new facility. This meeting will not be available, on Zoom and will not be recorded for posting on our YouTube channel. So you need to be there in person to experience this one. Advanced registration is required to attend. You'll find the link to do that on the slips with the QR code on your tables. Guests are welcome, but also must be pre-registered, and the deadline to register is today. So don't miss out on next week's meeting and make sure you get signed up today. And now I invite John Yates, Chair of the Youth Exchange Committee, to the podium for an update.
You may remember those two young people up on the screen. On the right is Mamoru. He was our Japanese inbound exchange student last year, and he just had a chance to meet at a Rotary district event in Japan, Scarlett Barshinger, the daughter of Alyssa and niece of Jake Miller. Anyhow, Mamoru wanted this picture put up here so that he could say hi to everybody in our club and thank you all again for hosting him and giving him just a tremendous experience. So that's Mamoru and Scarlett. Now, we have two other exchange students here. We have Sanaya. Sanaya is going to learn in 10 days what country she's going to. None of us know, but the country reveal event is Saturday on February the 1st, and that's when she will discover, and we will discover where she's going. And we have Nathan. Nathan is with us. He's at York Suburban. He is having a great experience here as well. And this is where we have an ask. Nathan needs one more host family to complete his stay here. He is in the York Suburban School District. And if any of you are in the suburban district or know someone who's in the suburban district who would like to host, please see somebody on our youth exchange committee, and we will, they're over here, and we'll make it happen. So thank you all for being attentive today, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, John. And, being a host family is a great way to experience people from different cultures and learn a lot. My family still keeps in touch with a youth exchange student they had, not through Rotary, and not in York, but back from Turkey. So it's been kind of cool to see that relationship. So it's very rewarding. So again, if you know of any families in the suburban district, please contact our youth exchange committee. And now past President Brian Tate has an important reminder from the Service Projects Development Committee.
Thank you, President Wilda. York Rotary Foundation is accepting proposals for new initiatives that demonstrate measurable positive impact in the lives of York City youth ages pre-K through 12th grade. Proposals can be for new, innovative programs or a quantum leap to an existing program that will provide measurable impact expansion. Project budgets must range between $50,000 and $100,000. I see a lot of our nonprofit partners grabbing their pens right now. Again, project budgets must range between $50,000 and $100,000 with the possibility of multi-year support. The RFP is open now through March 27th, 2026, and up to 2 projects may be accepted. Go to yorkrotary.org and find the online RFP application and guidelines under Our Impact to share it with your networks, or visit the Rotary Club of York Facebook page and share our promotional video on social media. And I think at this time, Ben is going to play for us the video.
The Rotary Club of York is seeking proposals to partner with organizations transforming the lives of York City youth ages pre-K through 12th grade. This could be a brand new initiative with multiple partners or a quantum leap to an existing program. We're excited to hear from York City organizations doing this good work, and will accept up to 2 proposals this year. If you want more information, please visit our guidelines and the application at yorkrotary.org under the tab Impact. We hope we can write this check to you soon.
So find that video on our Rotary Club of York Facebook page and share it to your network. We look forward to hearing from all types of applicants who want to share with us what great things could potentially be happening in our community to impact the young people in York City. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Brian. And as he said, please help us spread the word. Our goal is to reach people that are not within our Rotary or traditional Rotary realm. So if you can spread that word, help us spread the word throughout the York community. It can be and help us identify our next big impact project for our club. At this time, I would invite Aaron Rank up to introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you, President Wilda. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. One of the things I love about Rotary is that we don't shy away from big, important topics. And today's topic is certainly a big one: energy, specifically nuclear energy. I think few technologies inspire such a wide range of emotions. On one end of the spectrum, nuclear energy has been described as the most terrifying invention of the human mind. On the other end, it's been called one of the greatest tools humanity has for fighting climate change. Excuse me. Excuse me. Popular culture has also captured this tension, sometimes uncomfortably well. In Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, set at the height of Cold War nuclear anxiety, a general famously declares, "Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room." It's funny, but it also reflects how fear and human fallibility have long shaped the nuclear conversation. Historically, nuclear energy has been framed around fear of accidents, fear of the unknown, fear of what happens when immense power is misunderstood or misused. Albert Einstein once warned, "The release of atomic power has changed everything except our way of thinking." But there's another side to this story. Increasingly, nuclear energy is being re-examined not through the lens of fear, but through the lens of facts, innovation, and climate responsibility. As one environmentalist put it, if you're serious about decarbonizing the grid, you have to be serious about nuclear. Nuclear power produces reliable, around-the-clock electricity with zero carbon emissions, and it already supplies a substantial portion of our clean energy in this country. According to the Department of Energy, electricity demand from data centers, driven largely by AI, is projected to grow from around 4 to 5% of U.S. power use today to as much as 9 to 12% by the end of this decade, effectively doubling one of the most energy-intensive loads on the grid. This kind of constant high-demand growth is precisely where nuclear energy can play a critical role, providing firm carbon-free power at scale to complement renewables and maintain grid reliability. And the demands for AI explain why Microsoft has signed a 20-year agreement with Constellation Energy to reopen the Crane Clean Energy Center. So the real question for communities like ours isn't whether nuclear energy is simple, of course it's not, but whether we're willing to have an honest, open, informed conversation about how it fits into clean, resilient, and affordable energy future. And that's why we're fortunate to have today's speaker. Dave Marcheskie is with Constellation Energy, one of the nation's leading producers of clean, carbon-free energy and the largest operator of nuclear power plants in the United States. David works at the intersection of technology, policy, and public understanding, helping communities make sense of how nuclear energy actually works, what its real risks are and benefits are, and where it fits in our energy landscape going forward. And I'll say this personally, after talking with David, I found myself doing something a little unexpected. I stopped worrying and I started learning to love nuclear energy. Today, David will help us all do the same, move beyond the fear, past the characters, into a grounded discussion about nuclear energy's role in reliability, sustainability, and economic growth. Please join me in giving a warm Rotary welcome to Dave Marcheskie.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, President Wilda. Thank you, the Rotary Club of York, for having me today. We're going to cover probably a lot of ground, but I want to go through some slides. Stick with me, and then we can open up to some questions and have a good dialogue and conversation about everything dealing with either nuclear energy, the Crane Restart Project, and the like. I figured we'll start a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Dave Marcheskie, currently the Crane Clean Energy Center Community Engagement Manager. Prior to this role, let me back it up a little bit. I spent a little more than a decade with ABC 27 News as a reporter and weekend anchor. So if you maybe heard that name before, that's maybe where it was. And in 2017, 9 years ago, almost to the day, I think it was February 8th or so, I started with Constellation. I made the jump from media to 3 Mile Island at the time it was named, Unit 1, as the communications site manager. So we did everything from, internal, external communications, philanthropy, local government affairs. It was this huge bucket kind of role. And when the plant shut down in 2019, I stayed with the company, worked with our other plants in Limerick and here in the Mid-Atlantic, some Conowingo Dam. Then I got the phone call summer of 2024 and saying, hey, I think we're going to reopen TMI. And when my jaw hit the floor, let me tell you, because when we shut that plant down, that's it. It's never been done before. This is very a novel project, not just for Constellation, but for the entire industry. And by the end, I'm going to be proud to say I'm going to be the only guy in the whole world that's shut down the plant and to bring one back up. So looking forward to that. So again, a little bit about my role now. Went from communications to philanthropy, but there's a huge communications element to it. Still the media relations manager for the site. I cover 3 sites, so not just Crane, but also Peach Bottom, which is in Delta, York County, and Limerick, which is in Montgomery County, out towards Philadelphia. But for Crane is my baby, and that's my big focus here. We have a $1 million commitment over 5 years, which began last year till 2030. So I oversee those donations. So last year, to date, we have more than $225,000 to local nonprofits and workforce development opportunities. We were fortunate in 2024 in the fall, we announced in September that year. So we were able to get $25,000 out the door even in that year. And then last year was the first year for our overarching project. We do the bookmobile with the Lower Dauphin Communities That Care. I will say most of those dollars are hyper local within the Dauphin, Lancaster County realm. Now with Peach Bottom, just getting off topic a little bit, like they also have an enlarged philanthropy budget that I also oversee. So we work some of the York County nonprofits as well. So there is some overlap between Crane and Peach Bottom. We'll go back to Peach Bottom throughout this presentation a little bit. But that's kind of my role. And I work with state government affairs, local government affairs. We have local quarterly meetings to keep everybody informed. And let me tell you, I've been busy the last year. We've had more than 1,000 stakeholders, media members, influencers, come through the plant as we're trying to get our story out there. And speaking with you fine folks today is another great opportunity of mine to go around and kind of just tell our story a little bit. I know there's a lot of interest in the site itself, the history there, of course. And then now with this novel project moving forward, with the restart. We want to keep that open transparency and dialogue going. We have, again, first of its kind, an Instagram channel, which was hard to get. They were trying to do Facebook and, there's TikTok. So we settled on Instagram. So you can follow us at Crane Unit 1. We try to get out some of the inside videos and photos of what the project is looking like. So we got that off the ground last year. I will point out this bottom photo here with the American flags. Just in December, we had the Department of Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, come out for a tour. It was the first time that we had the Secretary Wright come out to the facility. Came out for a tour, and this was on the heels of a loan that we received, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But it was a great event. We have Microsoft up there, and then right to the right of me, or to over here on the left of the picture, I should say, is our CEO, Joe Dominguez. So we've been hitting all levels of local, state, and federal officials and stakeholders throughout the year. And in 26, looking for another big year. We did the teddy bear toss a couple weeks ago at Hershey Bears, which was a lot of fun. We had employees out there. So we're doing all sorts of things to try to get our story out. So thank you again for having me here today. Just a little bit to round out our team. That site communications manager position was that kind of all umbrella. They've now broken up that role in this new kind of era. I have Tyler Arkiton, who's our local government affairs. So if there's any county commissioners in the room, you may know Tyler, who works with on the local level with township officials, county officials, and the like. We have Alex Charlton, our state government affairs, who covers Pennsylvania and Ohio. Sarah Schmidt, who works in emergency preparedness within our EPZ. So every nuclear power plant has a 10-mile radius around the facility for emergency preparedness. So she deals with both Crane and Peach Bottom here in York County. And then Gary McLaughlin, who is a partner of mine, step in step, because he manages our workforce development, creating the pipeline of potential and future workers. We do things together with at the schools, the local universities. I know we are heavily involved here in York Tech for both Peach Bottom and Crane. And Gary was just named to the board of the PA Labor for Workforce Development. So he is a great resource if there's any educational institutions in the room to partner up with. We have a Skills USA program. We both put funding towards, and I believe he's starting in Lancaster County and potentially sites in York in the future. We've also developed what is the Chris Crane, who was the former CEO of Exelon, his own educational program that comes along with funding and skills based education too. Well, hold on real quick before the next slide. Okay, so raise your hand if you've heard of TMI Unit 2. Everybody in the room, right? Now raise your hand if you've heard of Deepwater Horizon. Mostly everybody in the room. What do you think was worse? If you think more people were hurt or died for TMI 2, raise your hand. You think it was Deepwater Horizon? Raise your hand. Okay, this is a pretty well-informed room. I've done this a couple other times, and it's usually reverse. Yeah, so usually when I pull this slide up, some people, especially in this area, are a little shocked to find out that, on March 28th, 1979, TMI Unit 2, while it's consistently called the America's worst nuclear disaster, there are no fatalities, no injuries, 0 cases of correlation of health issues by radiation exposure. They said it was 1 millirem, which is less than an average X-ray, about $1 billion in cleanup and damage, compared to Deepwater Horizon, where you can see there was 11 fatalities, 17 injuries, $146 billion in damage. But for me and what I do in getting out in the community, the biggest thing that I think people in this area especially are the evacuations at the time. If you were around in 1979 in the area, everybody I've met has a story, getting on a bus or driving away, and that fear that instilled during TMI Unit 2 still permeates today. And I understand that. I mean, I wasn't around at the time, but I have empathy for the folks who have lived through there and understand through multiple conversations of how scary that was. And it was true. And what they said at the time was, crisis communications was born out of TMI Unit 2. The lack of communication created such this sphere of fear that really shaped not just the site here at Fremont Island, but, for the entire nuclear industry, as Aaron pointed out and others. And for the longest time it was, hey, keep your head down, don't say anything, do a good job. And in that 30-year, bubble, the vacuum, pop culture took over. We didn't really, as an industry, get our story out there and talk about all the positives that nuclear energy can do. So we let that fear go. I mean, I'm sure everybody has seen The Simpsons and, all the other pop culture references and in the Marvel universe and everything else. I have top level officials in the state come in for tours and they're expecting to see, yellow hazmat suits running around with cans of green ooze in the back. It's just not how it works. But that's just goes to show you that people have a very limited educational view on nuclear energy as a whole. A lot of us go home, we flip on a light switch, we turn the lights on, we pay our electricity bill, and that's about it. We have hundreds of highly skilled men and women working at these facilities. And if anything, TMI Unit 2 really shaped the entire industry for safety and for how we view it as an industry internally. There's a picture of the headline news that hangs in our training center across the street from the facility there. Just a daily reminder that when they go in there to train, that this is the worst day that it can happen. Go in and have a safe day and ensure this doesn't happen again. Now, I say all that to let you know that we have nothing to do with TMI Unit 2, to be honest with you. So here's Constellation's portfolio here in Pennsylvania. We have what we call the Susquehanna Clean Energy Corridor. Of course, we have Crane Clean Energy. They're in Middletown or Londonderry Township, right along the Susquehanna River. Down in Delta in York County, we have Peach Bottom. And right nearby, we also have the Muddy Run Pump Storage Facility. And if you haven't been there, you can visit there. There is a visitor center at Muddy Run. I encourage you to go. There's an observatory there. It's really neat. They do a lot of programs for stargazing, and I know they had something with the eclipse a couple years ago. So it's really neat if you get a chance to stop in there. And I believe there's a park ground and also the Conowingo Dam, reaching almost 100 years of operation in 1928. So we're a couple years away from that. Also a pretty cool place to visit. Beautiful scenery down there, bald eagles. We actually own a pool as well. So if you want to go take a dip down next to the Conowingo Dam, you can. I also want to point out that we have Limerick Clean Energy Center, which is, again, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, a little bit towards Philadelphia, about an hour outside of Philadelphia. Peach Bottom I mentioned, and of course, Crane. So those are the 3 nuclear energy facilities that we own in Pennsylvania. There are 5 total. There's Susquehanna plant, and then there's also Beaver Valley out towards Pittsburgh. Not ours. I felt this was an important slide, again, to kind of reorient yourself and stick with me here. The entire island now is called 3 Mile Island. There's a couple different versions of why it's named 3 Mile Island. The best one I heard is that it's 3 miles from the airport. We'll go with that one. So it's 3 Mile Island. TMI Unit 1 began operation in 1974, 2 years after Hurricane Agnes, which of course was the worst flooding in this area that it's ever seen. If you walk through the plant, there's a blue line on the first floor that goes about halfway up. That is the Agnes mark. So that is the worst the flood has ever been on the island, and everything is built above that. And it was built at the time with contingencies, which, when the plant started 2 years later. Exelon purchased TMI Unit 1 and began operation in the year 2000. Unit 1 was shut down on September 20th, 2019 due to market conditions. We just couldn't sell our power. Had nothing to do with safety. I'll talk a little bit of that in a second, but basically, we tried for 2 years to get some sort of, state legislation or subsidy. There were some other ones going around. They call it a zero emission credit, but it was a single unit site that didn't make enough money. So we eventually shut down in 2019. In 2022, Exelon and Constellation split. Exelon took the utilities like PECO, BG&E, and Constellation, which was a subsidiary of Exelon at the time, rebranded and took the generation assets. And that's still the same to this day. So Constellation has all the generation assets, and recently, as of last week, completed the transaction with Calpine, and we are now the nation's largest generator of electricity. Exelon still owns the utilities, so we do not have any infrastructure when it comes to power lines or, in charge of your electricity bills or rates to any of that effect. So we're simply more now a generation of power company. Of course, in September 20th, 2024, just so happened it worked out on that date, we announced 5 years later that we're going to restart, which is now the Crane Clean Energy Center Unit 1. Again, named after the former CEO, Chris Crane of Exelon. He was a titan of the nuclear industry at the time, worked his way up to become CEO, and after TMI Unit 2 started what's called INPO, the Institute of Nuclear Power Operators, which is an industry watchdog that goes around to every power plant in the nation, and basically picks them apart and saying, here's what you need to do better for safety, for performance and efficiency. And that has really kind of guided the industry, along with our federal oversight watchdogs of the NRC, the DOE, and those other organizations, but also has this industry watchdog of open dialogue. We learn from other power plants, typically in energy and most other businesses, you want to keep the secrets close to your chest. That was part of the problem, and back in 1970 and 79. A lot of these plants have different designs. We have a sister plant in Ohio with the same exact design, open dialogue all the time, figuring out better ways to operate the plant for efficiency. If there's a part that we need, there's that kind of dialogue throughout the industry now because of Chris Crane. So that's why it's named Crane Clean Energy Center. Also want to point out there's 2 sets of cooling towers. This is a little bit unique to the island, not just Crane. Those are 375 feet tall, 2 per 1 unit because of the airport. So if you look at Limerick, the cooling towers around there, you can see for miles and miles and miles away, about 695 feet per cooling towers for 1 unit. So because of the airport so close, they're a little bit shorter. It is kind of neat. I'm sure if you're aware of HIA, it's a very popular spot for the Air Force One plane to do touch and go. So it's really neat kind of seeing it fly, probably the only plane that can fly over the island. So we have some cool pictures of that going over the cooling tower. Okay, so we shut down in 2019. We could not sell our power. Just to give you an idea, at the time in 2019, 2018, that time frame, we had historic low demand for electricity and more supply. With the Marcellus Shale natural gas industry, that boom of the 2010s, the 2010s, really kind of sank the price down. So the current price at the time that was trading at the auction at PJM, which operates the grid in our area, was about $19, $20 per megawatt hour. Our electricity, with the staff at the site and being a single unit plant, was about $40 per megawatt hour. So double the cost, right? And now at Limerick, our sister plant, towards Philadelphia, you have about the same amount of staff to operate a dual unit site as you do a single unit site. So being a single unit site at the time, making 835 megawatts per power, while we thought it was great for the grid, for diversity, because we are baseload power 24/7, 365, that was our claim to say, hey, we need to save this plant. The legislature felt different at the time, and so we had to shut down in 2019. A year later, not even a year later, I went to go work for Limerick shortly after the plant shut down, and then we were all dealing with COVID, the March after, and everybody went home except for the power plants at Limerick. But that's when power started to climb. Everybody's working from home, servers are working overload. And also this technology started coming around a little bit called artificial intelligence, AI. And people, or the tech industry at the time, was starting to scale. And you've heard some of the big players, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, the ones who are really investing in AI infrastructure have said there is not enough power on the grid to scale AI that they want to now. China's been scaling nuclear power for the last 5 to 10 years, they're building nuclear reactors at a clip that we can't even fathom. The last nuclear power plant that was built here in America was in Georgia. Southern Project just went online a little more than a year ago, but it was a disaster for the industry. It was a great example of how legacy nuclear energy is extremely difficult. It was over budget, over timeline, and everything. But it finally got up, and they have 3 working units, and that's probably the last legacy nuclear energy power plant that we can build here, which is just how it works. So with demand rising, 25% by 2030. I mean, I tried pulling some of these slides, as recent as, within the last 6 months, or these headlines, 38% higher. And they're all saying by 2030, by 2035, like there's not enough energy to go around for the scaling of the data centers and AI that they want. So they have to look for creative and alternative ways. Remember when I said we shut down in 2019? Never thought that plant was opening back up again. The first plant to announce was a plant in Michigan called Palisades. They were the first plant to announce a deal with Amazon at the time. And then that was in March of 24. And of course, in September of 24, we were the second to announce. Palisades is kind of on track. They got delayed a little bit, but most of that is due to some of their equipment at the site that has to be upgraded. Palisades also had a little bit a head start from us because they were only decommissioned for 2 years. We've been decommissioned for 5 years. I'll explain a little bit about that, but the training program takes 18 months to get nuclear operators trained up again. They didn't have to do that. They kind of got a deal where it was within as 2 years of being shut down, so they didn't have to retrain or relicense the operators there. The data center boom is continuing. And just if everybody has a phone in the room, right, has a smartphone, if you were to do a Google search and a ChatGPT search or anything in AI, it takes 10 times the amount of energy to Google or do a search or a query in ChatGPT saying, where's the best tacos in York County, than it does to do that in Google. Just think about that. 10 times the amount of energy. I don't think people understand or have fully grasped the amount of power demand that AI needs or wants. Now, whether or not that is a good thing or bad thing, that's not for Dave to decide, right? I work for Constellation, I work for the power plant, and our job is to generate the electricity. But what this has done is these companies are getting creative and looking at ways to put less strain on the grid. So that's why we are here today. So Microsoft and Meta and Amazon and the other tech companies are looking towards nuclear power, baseload power, 24/7, 365, also carbon free. They're not restarting coal plants or gas plants, and hope that's not the case. So for something that we didn't think was possible is now possible, because now we're at a historic demand with low supply of powers. Completely flipped within 5 years from that 2019 when we shut down to sitting here in January of 2026. And we can't get online fast enough. Just yesterday, there's an article, I recommend you look at it, by Utility Dive is the outlet, PJM. So it's the grid in our area. They operate in 13 states and the District of Columbia, DC. They control the power. So when you sell your power and they have it at auction, they kind of set the prices, but they also buy it 3 years in advance. All right. So they're buying power 3 years out. They just had an auction earlier this month and they couldn't fill the gap. And so now PJM is kind of freaking out a little bit. Data centers are looking to be built in Pennsylvania within the grid, and they're looking at creative ways that they can fill the gap. So they're talking about backstop, secondary auctions, maybe fast tracking some interconnection for new generation wind, solar, and hopefully our project as well with nuclear energy. So that's kind of where we're at, because there's not enough power to go around. So what Microsoft has done is filed what's called a PPA, a power purchase agreement. So contrary to maybe what you've heard or what some people believe, Microsoft is not getting our energy, right? So what they're doing is paying for us. We have a committed buyer for when we go online for the next 20 years. That's something we didn't have before we shut down. We didn't have a committed buyer. We put our energy on the auction, $40 per megawatt hour, couldn't sell it, had to shut down. But now it's like if you're a sports fan, it's kind of locking in your franchise quarterback for a long-term contract, setting the market, and then hopefully when the price resets, 5-6 years from now, you got your contract, at a lower price. And that's basically what Microsoft did. So they're locked in for 20 years at a fixed price that is competitive for them and good for us. Brings our plant back online for the next 20 years. At the time when we announced, and it still is, $1.6 billion of private investment by Constellation. Now follow me. So Microsoft is paying for the electricity for 20 years out whenever we go back online. We're putting up 1.6 billion, but in late November, early December, the Department of Energy issued us a loan guarantee for $1 billion, a loan, not a subsidy. We're gonna have to pay that back, but with low interest. The administration called us up and said, hey, we want to be on the forefront of, spurring new generation. And so, it's a low interest loan that we didn't have to get from the bank. Plus they're going to get that money back twofold. It was the first time in the DOE's history that they issued us a loan and a guarantee backed by the great faith of Constellation's credits, knowing that they're going to get their money back. So not to be confused with the Microsoft PPA and the DOE loan. So again, 835 megawatts of power will go to that PJM grid, not going directly to a data center. Now, if you've heard there might be a data center being built in the area, that's true. Two things can be true. That has not tied to our project whatsoever. We're told that Microsoft wants to build their data center somewhere within the PJM grid, but we've heard Ohio. I don't know exactly, but we're told it's not close to the area. I've heard of Dolphin Highlands or, Cleveland Cliffs shut down in Steelton. That might be a location for a data center. They need to also be by a body of water for cooling. So that's kind of what we do. So Constellation does not build data centers, but we are working with some of these companies. We've had another similar contract out in Illinois with our Dresden facility, and we have some other facilities within our portfolio that other companies are looking at purchasing, doing another PPA of some extent as well. When we shut down, we had about 650 positions at the plant. We're now looking to hire upwards of 700, 730 permanent jobs. About 150 of those are boomerang employees. So people like myself who worked at the plant previously, left, and then are now coming back to the plant. So, which is great to have 150 of those folks, but way more new coming in. And so we're doing that job now of resetting that culture. So when we worked there previously, it was one of the best cultures within the fleet. We had employee resource groups, which were heavily involved in the community. And that was one of the things that was talked about the least, in my opinion, was those things you didn't see. When the plant shut down, the Little League coaches, the scout leaders, those folks that really make up a neighborhood and a community had to move away to other parts of the state. And we have plants in Maryland that they had to move to. So it was great to see some of those folks coming back. And if you've been to downtown Middletown recently, it's, a lot of those businesses had to close too. So I know some of them are coming back, and it's great to see. So I want to go over the project a little bit. So this is a timeline. So there's a couple reasons why it's taking, from the time we announced in 2024 to when we hopefully go online sometime in 2027. So we announced September 20th, 2024, our intent to restart Unit 1. Prior to that, we did all the preliminary inspections of the facility, some of the major components, steam generators, reactor casings, all those sorts of things to make sure, hey, can we really do this? Right? We don't want to announce and not be able to do it. So we did all the legwork for months prior to that. Internally, I don't know if we've said this externally before, but we've I guess, started fielding calls in March of that year. I think shortly after Palisades announced their project, they, and realized it could be done. We started fielding calls for Unit 1 saying, hey, what will it take you to bring that plant back online? So the gentleman who was our decommissioning organization director at the time, his name is Trevor, spent 5 years putting that plant, taking everything apart, not major components, but, draining systems, taking systems offline, and it was ready to go into something called Safe Store, where it just sits there for 35 years. We were months away from that. And then we got the call in March to say, hey, go inspect the equipment, inspect the generator, make sure this is feasible. And when we figured out it did and kind of got a preliminary blessing from the NRC, we announced. I say that because we didn't go into this lightly, right? We go into this knowing everything that's involved with restarting a reactor. And there's 3 paths. So you have the regulatory path. You need all the environmental licensing. You need to license the plant, your programs to operate the plant. All that has to be approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC. So over the past year, from the fall of 24 to the fall of 25, was all that preliminary license submittal. We've had public meetings, we've had internal meetings, and there was a packet of information that was dropped off to the NRC this fall. We hope to get that approved in Q1 of next year, in 2027. We have to hire all the staff back. That takes time. But our HR department has been doing great. We are now about 90% staffed since we announced in 2024, which is phenomenal. When you're thinking of 700 and some jobs, that weren't there a couple of years ago, that's a huge undertaking, getting highly skilled workforce to come back to the area, to come into the area. Great job by those folks. And part of the licensing are the licensed operators. So when we shut down in 2019, those folks that were licensed at that plant can't go and take their license to another plant. You are licensed for that specific plant. So the good thing is, usually when you're at a power plant, you're going to stay there for your whole career, because it takes 18 months to 2 years to get that license. So that's what we're doing now. Last year, the first wave of operators started in April. And the second wave started this week. And it'll take 18 months for them to get licensed. They're currently on salary. They're getting trained. We have a training center with a exact replica of our control room simulators over there. Our folks are staffing it 24 hours a day, because you can only have 3 or 4 folks in there at a time. So it is all hands on deck over the training center to get those folks licensed, ready to go to operate the plant. It's much like a Navy flight crew. They're in there, you get 5 to a team, and that training never stops either. So when the plant is up and running, it's operational, they'll work for 4 weeks, have a week off, and that 5th week is a training week where they go in and have to get their qualifications and their exams to make sure that they can go back in and operate the plant, just to ensure that their skills remain sharp. And that's with every plant. I say that because not a lot of people understand that when you shut down a plant and you lose that brain trust and they go away, it's not an easy one-to-one to go to one of our other facilities. The great thing now, too, is that because it's been within that 5-year realm, a lot of the retirees have come back on a part-time basis, unloading that institutional knowledge they've had over 30, 45 years of operating that plant. It's been great to see. It's been a nice little reunion going around, talking to those folks. So it's been great. So you've got the staffing, the regulatory, and then of course the work itself. Now, fortunately, because it's been in that 5-year window, a lot of the major components were not dismantled. Cooling towers were still intact, steam generators, all those sorts of things. So what we're doing is focusing on restoration, making the plant the way it was back in 2019 when it was operational. There's a few upgrades that have to be done. A big one is our transformers. So to get the electricity from the plant to the transformers, from the switchyard to the grid. As soon as we announced, or even before, I think we put the order in. There's only 2 companies in the world that do this, and one of them is South Korea. And it takes a year for it to be built, and then another 6 months or so for it to get on a barge and shipped to us. So it's going to come over later this year, enter the Baltimore Harbor, and then get put on a big truck or a train and into our facility. So our bridge currently is being fortified to withstand the weight of that. It's a huge piece of equipment, a very expensive piece of equipment, to ensure we can get the electricity out. So those are like the three paths, and we are working towards a June 1st, 2027 readiness date. So that's not the exact date we're going to go online. There's some things we can control, other things we cannot control. PJM has to accept our electricity. And as we talked about, they need it, right? But things have to be done for them on their end to be willing to accept our energy. So we're working with them now to ensure that we can do that in 2027. So our CEO has said, as far as late December, that everything remains on track with the work that we need to do, all the three paths that we're doing, regulatory, hiring, and the work. So we should be ready to go June 1st, 2027, and hopefully not too soon after that, a restart date, going back online and generating electricity to the grid. All right, I know that was a lot of information. As we said, of course, energy is very simple to understand. A lot of moving parts. Hopefully nobody's bored, but opening up the questions. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there is a lot there. I'm under the impression that nuclear generation through a lot of the rest of the world is done more decentralized with units that are very similar, if not identical, which is a contrast to what we do in this country, I believe, which is these massive plants are designed and they're all one-offs. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, a lot of that was just born out of the competition at the time of, the 60s, the 70s, and even into the 80s, where Peach Bottom and Limerick were built in, mid 80s. It was just different designs at the time. Our design at Crane is Babcock and Wilcox. They have a couple different plants, across the nation, but that's it. Like I said, we have one other plant that's an identical replica of Crane or 3 Mile Island. Our Limerick plant is different than our Peach plant. Our Peach plant is different than our Dresden plant. It was just the nature of the business at the time that just had different engineers. I'll tell you what, it'd probably be a lot simpler if everything was very similar. It just also goes to show what TMI Unit 2 did to the industry, unfortunately. A lot of the fear was there. While we still built some new power plants post 79, such as Limerick and 109 in 86, there wasn't much built into the 90s. And whatever was already underway and was going in the early 80s and mid 80s was pretty much it. We said, the Southern project there in Georgia was the last one to be built. And that was a different design and unlike anything that's ever been built. They are fully digital controls. The one good thing about some of these legacy plants that they are analog. Can't hack into them. So as technology came around in the 90s and the 2000s until now, it's in hindsight, it's great for cybersecurity. There's starting to be Limerick is our first plant to hopefully do this in the springtime to what's going to call modernization, where it's kind of half analog, half digital. But I think a lot of the research now, and it's the new Wild West for nuclear, are the SMRs, the small modular reactors. If you've heard of that term, that's kind of what the new wave of nuclear energy is looking towards. How can we do what we do at Crane, but on a smaller scale? And a lot of these are quote unquote accident proof SMRs. So the industry, the regulators, the government is trying to put all the eggs in that basket. So for a lot of these plants that were built, 40, 50 years ago, I equate it to like an old car. The shell is still there of the Corvette, of a 69, Stingray Corvette, but over the years, you may have replaced the tires and you replaced the transmission, you replaced the engine. So the guts of these plants, while they look archaic on the outside, have been upgraded and modernized over those 45, 50 years. So it's just the exterior structure is, built to last with that time, but the interiors have been upgraded over the time. So I can't speak too much on why that design is, other than I just know it was the competition at the time.
Dave, thanks very much for speaking to us today. Two actually quite unrelated questions. First, with the inevitable expansion of nuclear power, has the used control rod circumstance been dealt with, and how? And the second question is, what's Constellation's proposal at this point with the exponential buildup of silt behind Conowingo Dam, which pretty much extends up to Holtwood Dam now?
Sure. So let me tackle the first part. I'm more knowledgeable. I did work for Conowingo Dam a little bit. I could talk about that as far as I understand. I'm not an expert in the silt billet, but I did deal with that for a couple of years there. All right. So I knew this would probably come up with spent fuel storage. So like Peach Bottom, like Limerick, Crane is no different than every other reactor in the country. We had one slight difference was because of TMI Unit 2, over the last 45, 50 years, all of our spent fuel was stored in a pool, just like that. It was an Olympic-sized swimming pool. All these fuel assemblies, those little squares, get placed into this pool. Whether we shut down or not, we had to build something called dry cask storage, or ISFSI, if you ever heard that, Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation. ISFSI is the acronym the industry uses. I just say dry cask storage. There are these concrete mausoleums that they put the canisters inside, seal them up, and we have them on our, let's see if I go all the way back. It's on our property, behind Unit 2, and it's about the size of a couple of tennis courts. It's not a very big footprint, all considering how other things are stored. And that's how we get around. So you see that dry cask storage, that is it. There's 46 canisters. The life spent fuel from Unit 1 is sitting on that pad with more room to grow. All right, I'm going to get technical for a second, so bear with me. So in your reactor core, there are 177 fuel rods in that reactor core. Grace Stanke, that's what she does. She's a fuels engineer, former Miss America, who now works for Constellation. So her job is to figure out how can we make that fuel the most efficient. The general rule of thumb is that that fuel in that canister can last for 6 years. Every 2 years, the unit shuts down to replace that fuel. And during that shutdown, they do work on the plant. It's usually about 15 to 18 days for shutdown. When you're shut down, you're not making money, but it's the only chance for us to refuel the reactor. So it's kind of like rotating your tires. They'll take a third of those 177 fuel assemblies out, put new ones in, but they rearrange it to make it the most efficient. So that's what Grace does, is to figure out how can we make it the most efficient. And then it can go for 6 years after that. So 2 more refueling cycles. I say that because once after that 6-year lifespan, those rods are then put into the pool to decay heat for 5 years after that. They sit it in the pool. It could probably be fewer than 5 years, but 5 years is the industry standard. And then from there, it goes into those concrete casks and sits on the pad. So that's the lifespan of the fuel. In France, they recycle it. They recycle those fuel rods. That's a regulatory thing, not an industry thing. I think they're looking into that now because, hey, I mean, other countries are doing it. Japan's doing it. France is doing it. So it's one way to get more fuel out of those existing canisters. You want to take one more? Are you good? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for today. I appreciate it. I'm here if you want to come up and have other questions. Thank you so much.
Time goes by so quickly. And I have to say, and I've shared this at the table before, but I think that's the hardest part of being a president, is having to watch the time and make sure that we're keeping on time. But Dave, thank you so much for sharing this update. We appreciate the time of taking the time to inform our club about what's happening and helping educate us about the complexities of electricity, because we all use it, love it, and appreciate it, and miss it when it's not here. As you know, our speaker signs a book to be donated and this week's book will be donated to the Crispus Attucks Early Childhood Center in York City, along with a bookmark made by the students at Creative York. This week's book is The Octopus Escapes. Again, next week we will be at Crispus Attucks, and just as a note, we became aware that there's a problem with the forms that are on your table. So if you're trying to register today with the forms on the table, that you can still register. It's telling people that it's full. You can register using the link that was sent out in last week's announcer, or you can email Lynn to let her know that you're going to be at the meeting. So we will see you next week at Crispus Attucks. Have a great afternoon.